Literary prizes are a funny thing that I sometimes struggle to keep up with, but if there are two that I always care about and always keep an eye on, it is the Women's Prize for Fiction and the International Booker Prize. Both of these prizes recently announced their longlists for 2024, and like always, they have really surprised me, more so this year than ever before. So I'm going to go through both of these longlists and give you my thoughts on them. We'll start with the Women's Prize because that one was announced first. Two quick things I want to say about the Women's Prize before we dig into it. The first is that I have not made a predictions list. I don't think about prizes at all leading up to the long list announcements. There might be books that I read and I think, yeah, I hope this ends up on the list. But that's about it. The other thing is that when this long list was announced, I was shocked by the fact that not only have I not read a single book on this year's long list, I've only heard of one of them. And that's only because it's a Scottish book. I live in Scotland and I kept seeing it everywhere in bookshops. Like seeing the reveal picture of the stack of books and going, what? That was quite something. So since it was announced, I've gone through the long list, I've read the blurbs, I've checked out the authors, and there are a few that I really want to read. Books I had never heard of, and I'm excited to check out. So since I can't talk about these books from experience, I'm just going to talk about the ones that I really want to read now that the long list is here. The first one that I want to check out is called In Defense of the Act by Effie Black. This book sounds fantastic, dark, satirical, and strange. It's about a woman who researches a thing I can't say on YouTube, but it rhymes with shmuashmide. And she secretly believes that this thing is a good thing, and it's her job to research it. Obviously that means that this book touches on grief and trauma and depression and lots of dark themes, but according to the blurb, it does so with its tongue in its cheek a little bit. There is reverence, there is humour, and I'm really interested in checking this book out. I actually kind of want to go and pick up a copy right now. The one book that I had heard of that I have seen everywhere in bookshops is The Maiden. This is a Scottish historical novel by Kate Foster. It's set in Edinburgh in 1679, and if you know anything about my channel, you know that I love historical fiction. However, I've been really burned out on it recently. I read so much historical fiction last year, and the fact that one of the few historical novels that I didn't touch last year is the one that's on this list is kind of hilarious. It's also a Scottish novel, and I keep telling myself to read more Scottish fiction now that I live here and love living here. Like, I'm staying. I love Scotland, so I kind of owe it to myself to read this one, especially since it is the one I'd heard of, and I do keep thinking about picking it up. The next one that I really want to check out is Night Bloom by Peace Adzo Mehdi. This book is kind of giving me Yaa Gyasi vibes, and I am an enormous fan of her writing. Peace Adzo Mehdi is a professor of politics at Bristol University, and Night Bloom is about two cousins who grew up together in a small town in Ghana. But as they grow, they change, they grow apart, and their lives follow different paths until eventually they converge again. I am very eager to check this book out. River East, River West is a book that, like all of the others, I had never heard of and yet sounds absolutely wonderful. This book is by Chinese-French-American author Alba Ray Lescure, and it's set between the Shanghai of 2007, a city I used to live in, and the Qingdao of 1985. Qingdao is a really interesting coastal town in China that I never got a chance to visit, but it has quite a deep colonialist history. A lot of the architecture there looks really German, and it's also where the beer Qingdao comes from. And the book is about two people and the lives that they lived in these times and places. I really want to read this one. I love Chinese fiction, I love books set in China, and I really am eager for this perspective. And finally, I am very happy, very kind of relieved honestly, that a Palestinian author is on this list. The book is Enter Ghost by Isabella Hamad. And regardless of what it's about, we all need to be reading more Palestinian fiction right now, showing our support for art that comes from Palestine. And besides that, the book sounds fantastic. It tells the story of a Palestinian actress named Sonia who spent a lot of years away from home, and now that she's back, she's working with a theatre troupe to put on an Arabic language performance of Hamlet in the West Bank. And according to the blurb, this is about the lead up to opening night. I am so eager to read this. I love theatre, I love Shakespeare, and we all owe it to ourselves to engage with as much Palestinian art as possible. I'm so glad that this book is on the long list. So those are the handful of books from the long list that I'm really eager to check out. If you've read anything from the Women's Prize long list, let me know. If there are any that you're eager to check out, also let me know. Now let's move on to the International Booker Prize. Now, unlike the Women's Prize long list, I have actually read a whole 2 of the books from the International Booker Prize long list. As for the other books on the long list, I've either heard of them or I'm familiar with the authors. So I feel like my feet are on firmer ground with this one, and the ones that I have read, I am so happy that they're on the list. One of them is this, Not a River by Selva Almada. This was translated from the Spanish by Annie McDermott. I did a review of it in January. Selva Almada is my favorite Argentinian author. She is a genius writer, and I am thrilled that this book is on here. It's published in the UK by Charco Press, who are good friends of mine, and I'm so happy for them. I've had the chance to interview Selva Almada myself, and I cannot say enough great things about her. She is one of my favorite authors of all time, and I'm so happy she's on this list. Not a River is an amazing book. You can go check out my review. The other book on the long list that I've read is What I'd Rather Not Think About by Jente Posthuma. This is a Dutch novel translated into English by Sarah Timmer Harvey. I can't find my copy anywhere, but it's here somewhere. This book featured on my favorite books in translation of 2023 list, and so obviously I agree that it should be on this long list. It is an incredible Dutch novel from the perspective of a woman who is a twin. She and her brother grew up together, inseparable as many twins are, but as we learn at the beginning, when they hit about 35 years old and they've moved from their small town to Amsterdam and live close to each other and continue to be close to each other, he eventually takes his own life, and she doesn't know what to do without him. This is their story, and it's told back and forth between their past and her present. It's a really, really incredible Dutch novel, and I'm thrilled it's on this list. One book that I haven't read, but I have read one of the author's other books, is Meta 210 by Hwang Sok-yong. Hwang Sok-yong is one of the most beloved Korean authors writing today. His work is incredible, and the translators who work on his stuff are all incredible as well. And this one was translated by Sora Kim Russell and Youngjae Josephine Bae. I don't know that I've read any of Bae's translations before, but Sora Kim Russell is one of the best Korean to English translators of all time. Her translation skills are legendary, and I've read, God, a dozen books that she's translated. She's translated, I think, all of the books by Pyeon Hye-young, who is perhaps my favorite Korean author. So Sora Kim Russell really is an amazing translator. And Hwang Sok-yong is a prize-winning, beloved Korean author. This book is a pretty hefty thing. I haven't read it yet. And according to the blurb, it tells the story of a group of rail workers who are all striking during the Japanese occupation of Korea. And the book eventually moves from that colonialist era up to the modern day. Hwang Sok-yong really is amazing, and it's so cool he's on this list. But there are also quite a few books on this list that I'm surprised I hadn't heard of. Like, for example, Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. I've read and enjoyed Jenny Erpenbeck's work before, and I had no idea she had a new book out, and that it's on this long list. One that I'd never heard of, and I'm really, really eager to read based on the blurb, is A Dictator Calls by Ismail Kader. This is an Albanian novel translated by John Hodgson, and it's based on something that supposedly really did happen, which according to the blurb is that in 1934, Joseph Stalin supposedly called a famous novelist and poet to discuss the recent arrest of another famous poet. And I guess the novel follows that conversation. It sounds fantastic. I really, really want to read this one. But do you know what almost instinctively struck me as weird, even though it isn't really weird in any way about this list, is that there are no Japanese novels on it. I kind of expected there to be for 2 reasons. One, I read and review a lot of Japanese fiction, and a lot of good Japanese fiction came out last year. But the other reason is that the Booker Prize is a UK-based prize, and Japanese fiction is the most popular translated fiction in the UK. More books are translated and published from Japanese in the UK than any other, so you kind of get used to seeing Japanese books everywhere. And even though I'm a huge fan of Japanese fiction, it is arguably refreshing to have a long list with no Japanese writers on it. That's actually kind of cool when you think about it. But if there is one book that isn't on the long list, and I so wish that it was, it's this. Aftershock by Zhang Ling. I read and reviewed this book like 2 months ago. I'm not sure if it was eligible, I'm not sure what the time frame is and how that works, but quite often you find books on a long list that aren't even out yet, so this should have been on it. Aftershock is an incredible Chinese novel, translated spectacularly by Shelley Bryant, and honestly, this is one of my favourite books of this year so far. I find myself thinking about Aftershock constantly. There are no other Chinese novels on this long list, and I really, really wish that Aftershock Aftershock had been on it. If I was an International Booker Prize judge, which I kind of dream of being one day, I would have made sure that Aftershock was on this list. There you go. I really didn't want to just go through both lists all the way because I would have nothing to say. So I've picked out some books that I'm interested in reading. I might read and review them soon. And also I just wanted to highlight the fact that even though I wasn't that familiar with the books on the International Booker, and not familiar at all with any of the books on the Women's Prize, the prizes still serve a really important function of getting us interested in stuff we hadn't heard of. So let me know what books you've read and you enjoyed and what books you're going to check out based on these lists. And subscribe for books.